I just found out my wife of 10 years secretly transferred $250, $0 from our joint account to her ex-boyfriend's offshore account just days before our divorce. Now she's denying everything and claiming I'm fraudulently accusing her. I never expected our marriage and everything we built to turn into a bitter court battle over money and property. Hello, everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now let's begin the video, using a throwaway for obvious reasons with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. Honestly, who does? Everything seemed fine. Well, as fine as it can be after 10 years of marriage. We had our ups and downs, sure, but I genuinely thought we were solid. That is, until I stumbled upon something that turned my world upside down in a way I never saw coming. It all started with a simple, almost mundane suspicion that led to the most shocking discovery of my life. It was a Thursday evening, and I was sitting at my desk checking some emails after work. My wife, Lisa, had been acting a little strange lately, more distant, more irritable. I chalked it up to stress from her job, which is typical for her. She's a high-powered executive, always busy, always on her phone. But lately she'd been secretive about her phone, hiding it whenever I entered the room, and her texts seemed more clandestine. Small things, but enough to make me wonder if she was hiding something. That night, I decided to do a little digging. I know trust is supposed to be the foundation, but after so many years, I'd learned to read her subtle signs. I checked our joint bank account from my laptop just to see if there was anything unusual, and what I saw made my stomach drop. There was a transfer, $250 to an offshore account registered under her ex-boyfriend's name. Her ex, Mark. I was stunned. That much money, just days before our divorce proceedings officially started. It didn't make sense. She'd always been careful with money, proud of how well she managed our finances. And Mark, they'd broken up years ago. Why would she suddenly transfer that much cash? And why just before we were about to split? I stared at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. My mind raced. Was this some kind of scam? Was she being blackmailed? Or was she planning to run away with someone else's money? The more I thought about it, the more I realized I had to confront her. I couldn't just sit on this and pretend everything was normal. The next morning, I sat her down before she left for work. I told her I knew about the transfer. Her face froze, then she looked at me with that smirk that's always made me uneasy, like she thought she was smarter than everyone else. She told me I was crazy, that I was just paranoid, that I was accusing her of something she didn't do. She denied everything, said she didn't even know what I was talking about. Classic Lisa, blame shift, deny, manipulate. But I had the evidence. It was right there. I showed her the bank statement, the transfer record. Still, she clung to her lies, claiming I was mistaken, that someone must have hacked into our account or that I was misreading it. She insisted she had no idea about any offshore accounts or money transfers. It was all a misunderstanding. She said, but I knew better. Something was rotten and I wasn't about to let her keep lying her way out of it. That moment, I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and confusion. How could someone I trusted for a decade do this? And to make it worse, her attitude didn't change. She kept up the act, acting innocent, even bitchy when I pressed her further. It was like talking to a wall. I could see the flicker of guilt behind her eyes, but she was trying to cover it up with her usual snarky attitude. I started to realize that this wasn't just about money. It was about trust, respect, and the life we built together. And the more I thought about it, the more I understood that this was just the tip of the iceberg. There was more she wasn't telling me. I could feel it in my bones. Whatever was going on, I knew I had to dig deeper. I couldn't let her get away with this. Not after everything. Not after 10 years. After that confrontation, everything changed. The house felt colder, heavier somehow. I couldn't sleep that night, replaying her words, her smirks, the way she brushed off my concerns like I was some paranoid fool. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs. Her late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way she'd dodge my questions about money. It was like I'd been blind all along, and now I was paying the price. The next day, I decided I needed to get to the bottom of this. I started digging into her emails, her phone records, anything I could find. I knew she'd be careful, but I also knew her too well. She's the kind of woman who's always been good at hiding her tracks, charming, manipulative, always with a quick excuse. But I was determined. I spent hours going through her emails, her social media, and her bank statements, and what I found made my stomach churn. There were dozens of messages between her and Mark, some recent, some from years ago, but what caught my eye was a string of emails from just a few days ago. They were discussing the transfer, planning how to move the money offshore without leaving a trace. She was clearly involved. I also found a receipt for a private jet booking. She'd scheduled a trip to the Caribbean for herself and Mark, right around the time she transferred the money. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just an affair. It was something much bigger: conspiracy, betrayal, outright theft. I felt my blood boil. I was furious, but I knew I had to stay calm. I called a lawyer that day and scheduled a meeting. I couldn't believe she was trying to wipe us out financially just to run off with her ex. And the worst part, she was lying about everything. She kept insisting she was innocent, that I was crazy, that I was inventing things. She even called me paranoid, accused me of spying on her. But I knew the truth, and I was going to make her pay for it. That evening I confronted her again. This time I laid everything out: emails, receipts, the transfer details. I told her I knew about her plans to disappear, to start a new life with Mark somewhere exotic, financed by the money she stole from us. Her reaction was priceless. She looked surprised, like she hadn't expected me to find out so much. Then she got defensive, started yelling, calling me a jealous, controlling asshole. She said I was crazy for accusing her of cheating, let alone theft. She told me I was imagining things, that I was turning our marriage into a circus, but I wasn't buying it. I saw her true colors that night: her bitchy attitude, her lies, her manipulations. She was trying to gaslight me into doubting myself, making me feel guilty for suspecting her. But I didn't. I knew she was guilty. That was the moment I realized I couldn't trust her anymore. The woman I married was gone, replaced by someone cold, cunning, and willing to destroy everything for her own selfish ends. The emotional toll was brutal. I felt betrayed, humiliated, heartbroken. I'd always believed in our marriage, in us. And here I was, discovering she'd been secretly planning her escape with my money and her ex. It was like a punch to the gut every time I thought about it. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I could have been so blind. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had to face the reality that she was no longer the woman I loved, and I had to decide what to do next. I started to think about my options. Divorce seemed inevitable, but I also wondered if I could somehow turn the tables. I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything. I was furious enough to want revenge, and I knew I had to plan carefully. I didn't want her to get away with this, not without consequences. The betrayal ran deep, and I was starting to see that this wasn't just about money. It was about respect, dignity, and protecting what little I had left of our life together. I resolved then and there that I wouldn't let her ruin me without a fight. I was going to make her pay, one way or another. Over the next few days, I threw myself into gathering evidence, planning my next moves. I knew she'd be careful, but I also knew her too well. Lisa always thought she was smarter than everyone else, that her lies could outsmart the truth. But I was determined not to let her slip away so easily. I started to piece together her schedule, her contacts, the places she frequented when she thought I wasn't paying attention. I hired a private investigator. It was a gamble, but I needed to see if she was actually planning to leave the country or if she was just bluffing. The PI was discreet, professional. He followed her for a few days, and what he reported back was confirmation of my worst fears. She was actively talking to Mark, making arrangements to leave, possibly for good. They were planning some kind of getaway, maybe to the Caribbean, maybe somewhere else. I didn't care where. What mattered was that she was actively trying to escape with my money and start a new life. Meanwhile, I kept confronting her. Every time she accused me of being paranoid or jealous, I just showed her more evidence. I told her I knew about the offshore account, about her plans, about the money transfer. She'd get defensive, call me obsessive, accuse me of ruining her reputation. She even had the nerve to tell me I was overreacting, that I was imagining things, that I was turning her into a villain. But I was. I knew the truth, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. One night I decided to lay it all out. I sat her down, looked her straight in the eyes, and told her. I knew everything. About the transfer, about her talks with Mark, about her plans to run away. I told her I had hired the pie, that I was prepared to go to court, and that she wasn't going to get away with this. Her face twisted, and for a moment I saw real panic. But then she switched gears, acting bitchy and dismissive, like I was just some jealous husband overreacting. She looked at me with that fake, innocent look she always had when she wanted to manipulate. "You're crazy, Jack," she sneered. "All this talk about money and ex-boyfriends, it's just your insecurity talking. I've never done anything wrong, you're just paranoid because I've been working late." That was the moment I realized how good she was at lying. Her words didn't match her actions. She was trying to gaslight me again, to make me doubt myself. But I was done doubting. I knew she'd been planning her escape. I could feel it in my gut. She was cold, calculating, and dangerous. I told her I was done playing her game. I told her I was going to take legal action, that I was going to protect what was left of our marriage, if that was even possible anymore. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew I couldn't stay with someone who lied, cheated, and tried to steal from me. That night I felt a strange mix of relief and anger. Relief that I finally knew the truth, and anger that I'd been so blind for so long. I started to prepare for the worst. I contacted a lawyer, gathered all the evidence, and made plans to freeze our assets. I wanted to make sure she couldn't just run away with my money. I also started secretly recording her conversations, just in case I needed proof in court. I knew she'd deny everything, but I wanted to be ready. As I sat there, reviewing everything I had collected, I realized that this was no longer just about money or infidelity. It was about respect, about standing up for myself after being betrayed so completely. I felt a deep sense of betrayal, but also a resolve. I wasn't going to let her destroy what little stability I had left without a fight. I had to be smart, patient, and ruthless if I wanted to come out of this with any semblance of dignity. The most shocking part, I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Lisa was dangerous, and I had to stay one step ahead. This wasn't just a matter of divorce anymore. It was a battle for my life, my future, and my sanity. I didn't know what she was capable of, but I knew I couldn't trust her anymore. The only thing I could do now was prepare for what was coming next, because I had a feeling this was only the beginning. The days that followed were a whirlwind. I felt like I was living in some kind of nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Every time I thought I had a handle on the situation, something new would come up that made everything even more complicated. I was constantly on edge, watching her every move, trying to anticipate what she'd do next. My mind was racing with possibilities: what she might do, how far she'd go, how much she was willing to risk just to get away with the money and leave me behind. I finally decided I needed to confront her again, face to face, with everything laid out in the open. I sat her down in the living room, all the evidence I'd gathered spread out on the table: the emails, the bank statements, the receipts. I looked her straight in her bitchy, defiant eyes and told her I knew about the offshore account, about her plans to leave, and about the money transfer. I told her I had a lawyer on speed dial, and I was ready to take legal action if she didn't come clean. Her reaction was classic Lisa. She rolled her eyes, scoffed at me, and started throwing out excuses. She claimed I was crazy, that I was just jealous of her success, that I was imagining things. She even had the nerve to accuse me of cheating myself, saying I was the one hiding something. She insisted she'd never do anything to hurt me, and that I was just overreacting because I was insecure. She said she loved me, but she just needed some space, some freedom. That she was planning a trip to clear her head, not to run away with my money. I wasn't buying it, not for a second. I saw through her bullshit. Her tone was bitchy, dismissive, as if she thought she could talk her way out of anything. But I could see the panic behind her eyes. She knew I was onto her. I could tell she was trying to manipulate me, to make me doubt what I knew was true. That's when I realized how dangerous she was. She wasn't just some woman who cheated. She was a woman willing to lie, cheat, and steal everything just to get what she wanted. I told her that if she thought she could manipulate her way out of this, she was dead wrong. I warned her I'd go to court, get a restraining order if I had to, and take every penny she tried to hide. I told her I was done playing her game, that I was going to make sure she paid for what she'd done, whether that meant exposing her to everyone, taking her to court, or just making her regret ever crossing me. She looked at me, still bitchy, still defiant, but I could see the cracks forming. She knew I wasn't bluffing anymore, that I had enough to ruin her if I wanted. She tried to turn it around, saying I was the one at fault, that I was paranoid, that I was ruining her reputation, but I wasn't falling for it. I'd heard enough lies, seen enough proof. I was done trusting her. I knew she was planning to disappear, to start over somewhere far away with Mark or someone else, and I was going to stop her. That night, I stayed up late reviewing everything I had. I contacted my lawyer again, told him what I knew, and started drafting the necessary legal documents. I wanted to freeze her assets, prevent her from transferring any more money, and secure my rights to the property. I wasn't going to let her get away with this without repercussions. I felt a new sense of purpose. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about protecting myself, my future, and whatever dignity I had left. At the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling of heartbreak. How could someone I loved, someone I trusted for so long, turn into this manipulative, lying cheat? I kept replaying our memories, the good times, the promises we made. It all seemed so distant now. All I could feel was betrayal, anger, and a deep, aching sadness. I wondered how I could ever look at her the same way again, how I could ever trust anyone after this. But I also knew I had to be strong. I had to stay focused, keep my head clear. I couldn't let her drag me down into her chaos. I'd been betrayed enough. Now it was time to fight back, not just legally, but emotionally too. I had to find a way to move on, to heal from this, even if it felt impossible right now. Because if there's one thing I learned from all this, it's that betrayal cuts deep, but resilience is what keeps you going. And I was determined to come out of this smarter, stronger, and finally free from her grasp. The days turned into a blur of legal meetings, late-night planning, and trying to keep my head above water emotionally. Every time I thought I had a handle on the situation, Lisa would do something new to throw me off. She started acting even bitchier, more dismissive, like she thought she could just bully her way out of everything. It was clear she was panicking, but she was also still trying to control the narrative. Her attitude was a mix of arrogance and desperation, and I could see she was trying to manipulate everyone around her, her friends, her family, even the lawyer. One day, I caught her sneaking around the house with her phone, whispering into it in the bathroom. I didn't have to be a genius to know she was making some last-minute arrangements. I decided to follow her. It was risky, but I needed to see what she was up to. I waited outside the bathroom door, listening, and I overheard her talking to someone, probably Mark. She was giving instructions, telling him to prepare the offshore account details, that she was going to leave soon with everything she could grab. My stomach sank. She was really planning to run, just like I suspected. That was the moment I knew I had to act fast. I called my lawyer, told him everything I'd overheard, and we moved to freeze her accounts immediately. We also filed for a temporary restraining order, so she couldn't access any more of our joint funds or transfer anything else. It was a hard pill to swallow, knowing she was trying to escape with my money, but I felt a strange mix of relief and anger. At least now I had some control. Meanwhile, I also started secretly recording her conversations when I could. I knew she'd deny everything, but I wanted to have proof, solid proof, that she was planning to leave, that she'd been lying all along. I felt guilty doing it, but I also knew I couldn't trust her anymore. Trust was gone, replaced by suspicion and betrayal. Every moment I spent listening to her lies, I felt more exhausted, more betrayed, but also more determined. One afternoon, she snapped at me during one of our discussions. She called me paranoid, accused me of trying to control her. I told her she was the one who'd been controlling everything, her secret meetings, her lies, her money transfers. She looked at me with that bitchy sneer and said I was just jealous because she was more successful than I was. That was the real kicker. She always had this way of turning things around, making me the bad guy, even when I had all the evidence. I realized then that she wasn't going to stop. She was going to keep lying, keep scheming until she managed to get away. I also understood that I couldn't keep playing her game. I had to go beyond just legal measures. I needed to prepare for a fight that would go much deeper. I started thinking about how to protect my reputation, how to make sure she couldn't manipulate her way out of this mess, and how to keep her from draining me dry financially. That night, I sat alone in the dark, staring at the documents on my laptop. I felt a strange numbness, part relief, part despair. I knew I was doing everything I could, but I also felt powerless. Lisa was clever, manipulative, and she was willing to do whatever it took to escape. But I also knew I couldn't let her win. I was tired of feeling like a victim, tired of being betrayed and used. I had to be smarter, tougher. And so I made a decision. No matter how much she screamed, lied, or tried to manipulate her way out, I was going to see this through. I would fight for what was mine, for my dignity, and for the truth. I knew full well that the road ahead would be rough, court battles, accusations, and probably some dirty tricks. But I was ready. I was done being the fool who trusted blindly. From now on, I was playing to win. Because if there's one thing I learned from all this, it's that betrayal can come from the person you love most, but resilience and honesty are what truly matter in the end. And I was determined to hold on to both, no matter what it took. The final stage of this nightmare hit harder than I expected. After all the evidence was in, the legal battle started. Lisa fought tooth and nail, trying every trick she knew, denying everything, accusing me of stalking her, even claiming I was trying to ruin her reputation. She played the victim better than I thought possible, twisting her words, twisting the truth, all to make herself look innocent. But I had the proof, recordings, bank statements, emails, and I wasn't about to let her manipulate her way out of it. The court process dragged on for weeks, and each day felt like an emotional roller coaster. I'd sit there listening to her lie in court, her voice dripping with sarcasm and disdain, trying to convince everyone she was the wronged party. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet, letting the evidence speak for itself. Every time she threw a tantrum, I remembered that I was fighting for my future, for my dignity, and for the truth. It wasn't easy. There were moments I doubted myself, moments I wanted to give up, but I knew I had to see this through. In the end, the judge awarded me full control of the assets, froze her offshore accounts, and ordered her to pay back a significant portion of the money she stole. The look on her face when I got the final court ruling was priceless. She was furious, defeated, and humiliated. She tried to appeal, of course, but it was clear she had no leg to stand on. Her lies had unraveled and her manipulative tactics had failed. Getting through the aftermath was another challenge altogether. I had to rebuild my life after a decade of betrayal. The house felt emptier than ever and the silence was deafening. I had trusted her with everything, our dreams, our money, our future, and she had taken it all, trying to run away with her ex and my savings. It hurt like hell, but I knew I couldn't let her define me anymore. I started therapy, worked on healing, and focused on moving forward. Looking back, I realize how much I learned from this ordeal. Trust is fragile, and even the strongest-looking relationships can hide the darkest secrets. But I also learned that resilience and honesty are powerful. I refused to be a victim of her lies and schemes. I fought hard, stayed true to myself, and came out the other side with my dignity intact. My advice to anyone in a similar situation: trust your instincts. When something feels off, don't ignore it. Gather evidence, seek help if needed, and don't be afraid to stand up for yourself. Betrayal cuts deep, but it also teaches you how strong you really are. I may have lost a lot, but I gained clarity, strength, and a renewed sense of self. I know now that no matter how dark things get, there's always a way out if you're willing to fight for it. And in the end, that's what truly matters.